The wild and weird electrical storms have abated, the torrential rain has eased off, and as spring returns to the Bane, the scouts are back out, whether on horseback or whether taking to the air. They're out and about, keeping an eye on the other tribes that have invaded the Bane. And as the mud on the roads and trackways hardens, a new sound echoes around the hills and valleys, the tramp of marching feet. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth we begin the Bane Wars campaign, Part 2. Hi, I'm Rob Poyton. Thanks for joining me today on Dragon's Teeth, where we are starting the second phase of the Bane Wars campaign. So, just to set the scene, in case you haven't seen the previous parts, the Bane is a magic blighted area. Think of it as a sort of sword and sorcery post-apocalyptic area that was blighted by magic in the Great Wars. It's largely uninhabited for many generations, but the tribes who live around the edge of it now need to expand to get fresh land and new resources. It just so happens, as these things do, they all decided to start exploring the Bane at the same time. So, that was part one, the exploration phase, the various tribes around the edge coming in and exploring, and also each tribe had one or two particular objectives as well. So the player character tribes we had in part one was Terry with the Bear Clan humans, we had Mark with the orcs, we had Matt with the High Elves, we had Steve with the Fire Elves, and as for me, well, I took over the role of the Necromancer with his undead minions. And yes, phase one was basically these forces sending out scouting parties to see what was there in the Bane, because this area has been unmapped for generations. No one has gone in there. Among the things they found were ruined cities, old towers, abandoned villages and towns. There was, they did discover, or at least the Fire Elves discovered, a big dwarven mining operation that had been going on for a little while, which led to some interesting encounters, shall we say. And as well as that, I mentioned this idea of objectives. Each clan has their own lore, of course, and each had a particular item from that lore that they were searching for. In the case of the orcs, it was the Iron Crown. The Bear tribe were looking for their sacred lands, the burial grounds of their ancestors, and so on and so on. The way that things ended up is most of the clans found their objectives by one means or another, in some cases by sheer good fortune, particularly the orcs, who actually discovered, I think, at least two or maybe three of the other clan objectives, and for some strange reason decided just to ignore them and leave them there. And in fact, even the Iron Crown that they were looking for did come into their possession when they captured a load of dwarves after a battle. Again, for reasons known only to themselves, they let the dwarves go without searching them, and the Iron Crown later ended up in the clutches of the vampires. They, a few turns later on, gave the orcs the Iron Crown in return for an alliance against the humans. That didn't really work out well either, but you can see all that in part one. Now that phase one, the exploration, is over, phase two is Conquest. So each of the clans now has some sort of presence within the Bane, some greater than others. The orcs and the High Elves have a little bit less. They didn't spend so much time exploring, for example, whereas the Fire Elves were all over the map. They covered a whole sort of lower portion of the map. They discovered loads of things. They've got little outposts everywhere, and of course they captured that dwarven mine situated right at the centre of the Bane. So they were very busy. The bears also did very well, and the vampires also found one of their main objectives, and they're basically occupying the top right hand corner of the map. What happens next is each of those forces receives reinforcements, and now begins the serious business of seeing what other people have got and deciding whether you want to take it or not. In terms of our players, we're keeping the same clans. We do have a new commander. Nils from California has taken over the role of the Orc commander. Nils, lives in California. He actually lives not far from a town called Auburn, which was the birthplace and the home of celebrated with fiction writer Clark Ashton Smith, who was a contemporary of H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard. And in fact, Nils has become what we call our Auburn correspondent on our Clark Ashton Smith podcast, Strange Shadows. He's a regular on there and gives us lots of great information. So if you're into Clark Ashton Smith and weird fiction, I'll pop a link to the show in the notes below. Our other commanders remain. We do still have, if you're very quick, space for 1 or 2 extra commanders as well, if you'd like to take over the dwarves, for example, or there's some mysterious humans lurking about as well, or an other tribe or clan of your choice. If you can drop me an email within the next few days, then we'll be able to squeeze you in, I'm sure. As before, the rule set we're using is the excellent Fantastic Battles set. 10 mil, it's our favourite of all the systems we've tried. Very adaptable. One of the big attractions of it is you can make your own army to measure. There's no limitation on what you can have in your army necessarily. It's all really down to the players. Now, of course, this is a particular setting. It's my own setting. So there are a few little tweaks and 1 or 2 things. In particular, I tweaked the magic system. It made sense to me that the Fire Elf Mage is going to have fire-related spells. They're all to do with dragons and that kind of thing. I won't say too much more than that. The Orcs have got Shaman as their magic users, so their spells tend to be more Shaman-orientated, and so on. Other than that, the players are free to choose their own forces and their own armies. If they can justify it, they can have it. I think someone was talking about maybe some mammoths or war elephants at some point. Well, maybe. If they can convince me, then they're in. The players started in phase 1 with 1,000 points of expeditionary force. And again, as you can imagine, as these were an expeditionary force and mainly scouting, they were fairly light troops. I think everyone had some sort of heavy cavalry or a heavy infantry unit, but by and large there was a lot of light cavalry, light infantry, that kind of stuff. Things that could move very quickly, things that could go out there and map this unknown terrain. Now that the terrain is known and mapped out, now we can bring the heavy stuff in. So each commander now gets an additional 1,200 point army. That starts at their home borders, and this is the main force that's going to come in and confront or ally with the other clans. The existing expeditionary force are now manning the various villages or towers, or in some case fortresses that were discovered, or dwarven mines as it happened. So they're basically garrisoned in these places around the Bane. And if we take a look at the map, so first the map was blank. Everyone just had a blank map and they filled bits in as they went along. Their scouts travelled a certain number of hexes per turn and they were told what was in the surrounding hexes. For phase 2, everyone has received a copy of this map, and you can see most of the Bane has been mapped or filled in or discovered, except for that bit in the bottom corner there down to the southeast. That has been pretty much untouched. There could be a few unknown things down there. Who knows? Time will tell. But because everyone has been mapping and because everyone has scouts, particularly flying scouts, whether that's from the humble bird up to the mighty dragon, everyone has a pretty good idea of where everything is. Of course, they don't necessarily know yet where the major forces are, but that's all going to come into play as we go along. You may also remember, if you followed part 1, that as well as the scouts, we had spies and espionage as well. So each game turn, which represents 1 week, the players could allot a certain amount of gold coin towards either spying or to anti-espionage. And spies were given specific missions It might be to judge the size of enemy forces and where they are. It might be to sow discontent in the enemy ranks. In one case, there was even an assassination attempt. And of course, the success or otherwise of that depends largely on the amount spent on counter-espionage by the target player. And naturally, there was diplomacy between the various clans as well. There were various meetings, some alliances were formed, some alliances were broken, some harsh words were exchanged. So that, of course, is another aspect of the campaign. And again, as I've said before on the channel, one of the great things about wargaming to me is setting up these narrative type games where, yes, we can play a series of linked battles, and if you suffer losses in battle 1, they're not there in battle 2. But how much more interesting if we can tie it all together in this narrative, where of course it might be that, yes, you get losses in your first battle, but you can send back for reinforcements. Now, whether those reinforcements arrive in time for the second battle or not, that can be up to a lot of things. Perhaps those sneaky spies have cut down trees and blocked a road somewhere, for example. So all this sort of thing comes into play as well. That then is our basic starting point for phase 2. We've got some forces already on the table, so to speak. We've got others on the edge of the table who are going to be coming in very soon. The players send in weekly orders for their units. They get told what happens. If they encounter another army or other forces, then there's the option to talk, to run, or to fight, basically. And battles generally are played out at the club, or if it's a small skirmish game, perhaps I'll do it here. I think last time for the attack on a dwarven fortress, I think we played that round at Steve's house. You may have noticed earlier, the sharp-eared among you, that I mentioned Niels is in California. So I don't think he'll be popping over just to play a war game, but he has got players over there as well, because he owns Fantastic Battles and he plays it, which is why he wanted to join the campaign. So we're not sure how we're going to work that out yet. If the orcs get into a fight with the fire elves or something, we're not sure, but we'll work that out as we go along. I'm sure we can do something, you know, even maybe fight it over Zoom. That might be interesting, challenging perhaps, but it could be interesting. And of course, I'll be putting up regular reports here just to keep you abreast of the latest developments in the Bane Wars. We'll certainly do full reports on any battles that take place. I think this time there's going to be more battles. We had 3 major battles last time, largely because of this scouting aspect, and no one really wanted to get too close. But now all the forces are well established, particularly those that have fortresses. I can certainly foresee perhaps a siege or 2 coming up. That'll be fun to play. If you want to make sure you don't miss anything, then just click the subscribe button below, of course, and you'll be kept up to date with all the latest goings on. And as I mentioned, there are still a couple of spots available there. If you wanted to jump on board, let me know. Get in touch within the next few days. Send me an email, send me a message by Dragon even, anything like that, and I'll send you all the details and tell you how to get started. So there we go, Bane Wars Phase 2. Be interested to see how this one turns out. The last one, certainly, I guess it's like anything. You start a campaign with certain ideas in mind, and it goes off in completely different directions, which was fantastic. One of the great things, as I said before, was the players inventing their own lore and making their own artifacts and objectives up. That really gave the game a lot of character. So I expect to see more of that. I expect to see some skullduggery, and I certainly expect to see some big, fantastic battles. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.